I am thrilled about this next session, our True Confessions, to kick us off. And I wanted to invite in Tanya Lowe to do the introduction. But before then, I want to just say that Tanya herself is quite an extraordinary entrepreneur, and it's been really interesting. You know how sometimes if you buy a new car or a new bicycle and it's a brand new yellow one, and you think nobody else in the world has ever had this yellow bicycle, um, I, and then you see it everywhere you go. Like it shows up all the time. That's been Tanya for the last 3 weeks of SVI. Like everyone I spoke to, it's like, oh, talk to Tanya. Workshops are being created. Oh yeah, Tanya's a part of it. So one of the beautiful things about Tanya is that she is a mover and a shaker in the entrepreneurial world. She runs Tandem Innovations Group. She has a successful track record. She's a CFO of the Alinker. She is co-publisher and COO of the Momentum magazine. She's a SheEO activator, as B said earlier, she's a shit disturber, which is why she's here. So we're delighted to have you, Tanya. And if you could help introduce B, we'd love that.
Wow. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Pam. I think, we're connected in so many ways, and it shows up when it shows up, and it's really wonderful to be here. Well, as Pam said, my name is Tanya Lowe. I'm calling in from the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples here. I'm a mother, an edge walker, a venture builder, and I hold many roles in the community, including being the CEO and co-founder at Tandem Innovation Group. My role, as Pam mentioned, is as the CFO at the Alinker. I met B at the tail end of 2016, as Alinker was just getting out there into the marketplace. I think B had just come from SVI, actually, just right before that. Pam asked me to share a few stats to give you a little bit of context of how far Alinker has come in the last few years. So over the last 3 years, the Alinker has tripled in revenue. Just last year, reached a new milestone of $3 million in Canadian sales, Canadian dollars in sales. They employ a staff of 9 people, with over half being Alinker users. And it can be found in over 10 countries. So those are some of Alinker's business stats. But what I wanted to really share with you is what started out as a business relationship has become one of my most cherished friendships. Most mornings I wake up, I get my kids out the door, and the first thing I want to do, I get them out the door and send them off to the bus, and they take the bus to school. But right after that's done, the first thing I want to do is I give B a call, and we can check in on each other. We hear about each other's wild dreams that came to us the night before, and then we meander into connecting about priorities for the week and what to share with the team. What started out as a company that sells walking bikes has now become a movement where we connect and focus on ensuring access to mobility, community, and healthy foods. We met in Vancouver, and now you live in Toronto or the surrounding areas of Toronto. And we have an Alinker farm in Kentucky. What happened, B? This is starting to sound a little crazy. So I'd love to introduce you all to my good friend and partner in many adventures, CEO and founder of the Alinker, BE Alink.
Well, thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Pam. And this is what I'm going to talk about in the next hour or something. Well, years ago, I didn't talk publicly. I I had to grow into a role of being the CEO of the Alinker. Before I further, I am calling in from the unceded territory of the Kawarta Lakes, which is Treaty 20, and it's the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe people, which are the good humans, and the Kawata, which later was Europeanized, if that's a word, into Kawartha Lakes. But the original meaning of Kawata is the land of reflections. And this is also where Pam and I, from being here outside Toronto for the last 6 weeks or something, is where Pam and I had conversations about what the TrueConfessions is going to be about. Somebody loves my glasses. Oh, I'm not going to tell you where I got them. A little background on me and SVI. In 2014, 2015, I was at SVI. I didn't have a clue what a share in a company was at that time. I didn't have a product yet that was on the market. It was still prototyping. And at the second SVI, I think in 2015, Vancity was presenting at SVI. And me as a new Canadian, I came to Canada in 2009, 2008, 2009 or something, through 10 years international work, being born, raised in the Netherlands, then going 10 years international work. We'll get to that. And I landed in Vancouver, and banks are banks. They're all bad, as I thought. So somebody said, like, go to, whatever, one of the Canadian banks, and it wasn't Vancity. At SVI, I learned about Vancity, and I was like, what's so different about that? And so I learned what makes Vancity so special. And at that moment, before we made revenue, yes, we converted the next day after SVI. I went to Vancity and converted my bank accounts and the business accounts to Vancity. And so, as Tanya just said, just last year, $3 million went through Vancity to serve all the good investments that they're invested in. And we're like, even though I live in Toronto now, we stay with Vancity because that's cool. It's a cool bank. So thank you for introducing me to Vancity back in the days. Yeah, the Alinker, like you just saw a little picture for the people that don't. Show of hands, who doesn't know the Alinker? Who doesn't know what an Alinker is? Okay, good. Then I can, Pam, maybe you can click up a picture of an Alinker and I can explain a little bit, because that is quite important.
Yes. Archie, if you could pull that up, please.
So what happened no, I'll get to that later. In 2011, my mom, when I was in Canada already, but my mom in the Netherlands, very stubborn Dutch woman, passed away last year. But in 2011, she said, over my dead body, will I ever use one of those things? And she pointed at rollators and some scooters used by people on the marketplace. What that comment did to me is make me aware of that medical devices emphasize the disability, and they create a divide between people with and people without disabilities. So I thought, that's weird. Why are we treated as a body with a problem? Like, medical devices are a technical solution for a body with a problem. We're not a body with a problem. We're full human beings that want to live a full and engaged life. So as I can't stand injustice, and to me that was an injustice issue, I thought, like, oh, I need to be, I can do something way better. I'm going to make something that at least my mom will use, because that sounded ridiculous that she wouldn't want to use something maybe for her safety or moving, getting out of the house or something, just because of the stigma. That was in a case of injustice. And then I spring into action because that's how I was raised. And so I designed the Alinker. The premise of the Alinker is that it is so cool that the user would love to use it, and that it would have to be so cool that you're the one on a cool bike, instead of what happened to you, of like, oh, that's uncomfortable, I'm not going to talk to that person in a wheelchair. All quite subconscious, of course, but that's generally what people using mobility aids are experiencing from the world out there. So then I came to this. It's a whole process, 14 prototypes, and it's been quite a journey. I started, so my mom made that comment in 2011. At that time, I was quite a fresh immigrant into Canada, and I was still getting my immigration stuff going. All the people on the pictures that you see can barely or not walk. By the way, people always think like, oh, why you use models? Like, these are not models. These are people that actually use those Alinkers. And on the left side, you see Brandon and Emily right now on the Alinker farm in Kentucky, which is a completely accessible farm, making farming accessible. Maybe that later as well. What I'd like to talk about in this True Confessions, because I struggled a little bit with the word confessions. I was like, I don't live a life that I hide things, or that I'm ashamed of things and I'm gonna like keep them by myself. So I actually don't have many confessions, I don't think. But Pam talked me through the whole story of, oh, okay, let's just talk about what the experience is of being an entrepreneur, and being a strange entrepreneur, of course, because I'm very often called crazy still in my life, which of course I am. This is just, for me, this is normal, but of course I'm quite crazy. And I'd like to use this True Confessions to rephrase and reclaim the word crazy, because crazy is, I mean, etymologically, it goes back to 1570 or something, when the word crazy was used as unfit and sickly. Then a decade later, or a few decades later or something, it was like when a house was crazy, it had cracks in it. So it was, you know. And then in 1920 or something, the word crazy, through the jazz movement, got a positive connotation, like, oh, that's crazy good people, like, you know. So crazy has morphed as a word through time, and I'd like to reclaim the word crazy right now, especially for women, because the word crazy is very often used, especially to women, to like, oh, so I don't need to listen to you because I don't need to take you serious, you're just crazy. But it has been quite a theme in my life. When I grew up, I very quickly realized that I'm not a typical boy, I'm not a typical girl. And in high school, I learned about gay people and about lesbians, and I thought like, oh, there's something else, and no, that's not me either. And then my brother got a relationship with a, what we called in that time a transsexual, who had adjusted her body to be the woman that she was. And then she was always teasing me. She said, oh, if anybody is a transsexual, it's you. And I was like, this is quite okay with me. So that's not it either. So what happened, and what my experience in life was, is that I was always the weirdo, but I didn't like treat it different than what I felt. Not finding any language for who I am, not finding any language for what I experienced inside. So I started feeling weird as normal, because that's just me. I'm doing things in a different way. Being crazy, though, and I'm using this word in the most positive way, leads me to the call in question for this True Confessions, is like, how do you first of all, find your own crazy, be true to your own crazy, and not have all the assumptions and conditioning that is out there of what we're supposed to do and supposed to feel. All the assumptions of investors, of whatever, as we grow, as I have grown as a CEO in a company, not have all the opinions of people drive you crazy. So the calling question is, how do I stay true to my crazy without other people driving me crazy? That's pretty much what what I think is what I'd like to further explore. And there's a lot of layers to that, and there's a lot of rabbit holes and stories and backstories and whatever. So
Yeah.
what Pam and I have prepared is that we're going to have a bit of a conversation, because I hate talking to people. I like talking with people. So Pam and I are going to further have a conversation about being crazy and reclaiming crazy,
Beautiful.
and what expectations are in a role as a CEO and all that stuff.
Thank you, B. One of the things that I've long admired about you is that you're someone who just will always confront the mainstream. You're just not going to just sit by and play into the system. And it's one of the things that I think has really set you apart in the world of entrepreneurship, and that you're not, I've heard over the years from different investors and different folks that you've been in conversations with, and they want you to play the game. They want you to play within the confines of the game where they have actually created the rules, and you upend that. And I very much admire that, and want to applaud that. And I love the notion of reclaiming crazy, because most of them, the creative, innovative, and out of the box thinkers and doers in this world have been called crazy or considered that, and that's a compliment. And you get to reclaim that. I'm curious, so you talked a little bit about your origin story and how you came to your innovation for your mom. But let's go back a little further. Like, when did you first decide? I know in your background that you were an architect at one point, and that's part of the story of how you do inventions and you build things. Tell us a little bit about one of the first times where you realized that breaking the rules and being true to yourself was really the path forward.
Yes. There's like when a question comes to me, I'm always thinking like, where do I go with that? There's 20 rabbit holes that I see that happens in my head. Where I'd like to start is with my grandma. My grandma we're from a very poor family, and my grandma had justice as the guideline in her life. And she taught me a lot, and I just said that in a little breakout group. She said very small sentences that I still remember, and that are the and she was a shit disturber. She said she was on the barricades without really being on the barricades, but she was constantly exposed to being the matriarch of the family and living in a patriarchal society where the woman has nothing to say. Well, that was not happening in my grandma's house and in our family. And so she always said, like, they can take anything away from you. They can take your house, they can take it, but they cannot take your pride. So you choose who you are, and you walk with your chin up. And every night you go to bed, you watch in that mirror as you brush your teeth and say, like, you're the one I want to go to sleep with because I like you. You've done everything that you could do. You didn't leave any things that you couldn't, that you should have done. You always showed up with kindness and justice. So that's still, every night when I brush my teeth, that goes through my head. Like, do I want to sleep with you? And so it sort of led me to a practice of choosing who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the word mainstream and the word outside the box. Let's pick that language apart, because we can pick crazy apart, but we can take mainstream or
Yes.
out of the box apart. People sometimes say to me, like, you think outside the box, and I'm like, what box?
What box?
I realize that you live in a box, but that's not my box. Because, I mean, if you pick that on the gender issue apart, and I think that's where I never fitted. I wasn't a boy, I wasn't a girl, yet I was born in a white patriarchal capitalistic society in the Netherlands, where the economic model is man, woman, kids, cornerstone of society. Anything that is different is upsetting to the system. Well, I wasn't that. So by birth, by the essence of who I am, I was upsetting to the system already.
Right.
It also means that the conditioning that typically happens to typical women and typical men didn't apply to me, because that wasn't me. So
A lot
I'm
of freedom
actually,
in that.
exactly. So the lack of language for who I felt I was as growing up as a gender weirdo, still don't have any language, which is fine with me. The lack of language I learned to really, really value, because it gives a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
Like the moment, and I felt that later when I lived in Afghanistan, for example. I lived 3.5 years in Afghanistan. You think, oh, white woman, being an architect, project manager, and then being a lesbian or whatever ish. Living in Afghanistan, that's not going to go well. But I never give things a name, because I don't have a name. Same as my pronouns, I'm just B. The more, if I would say in Afghanistan, hey, I'm a lesbian, they would probably stone me to death as a sort of, over the top kind of response, just to make that clear here. But if I don't say anything, just show up. Afghans go by how you feel. They don't go by what they see. The moment I give myself a name as a lesbian, I force them to have an opinion. Now it's wrong, because now you give me a word and I have to, like, that's wrong. Now I have to stone you to death.
Right.
But if you don't give it a name and you just show up, and I've lived all over the world, and there's two things that I learned. If you just show up as who we are, born as little, naked, quite ugly, except for the parents, they think differently, but we're quite ugly little creatures when we're born, and we just want to be happy. Right? So if you meet on that level and see all the rest as that's what we have. I have a body with a problem, maybe. I have a body that has a white skin color. I have, this hair. I have even a name is given to me. Now, this one I gave myself. But that's all what we have. Our culture is what we have. That's not who we are.
Right. Right.
So, and that's also the basic principle of the Alinker. Like, we're not a body with a problem. And the moment we judge on the sum of our exterior characteristics, we're in trouble, because we create divides. But
right.
that is exactly what the systems, food, pharma, war systems, thrive on division, to keep us small.
Exactly. And the disconnection perpetuates the cycle and just keeps us in this loop. So I'm curious about, I love how the way in which you just won't adopt. You're just not going to adopt. You're outside of. But you didn't set out to be an entrepreneur.
God, no.
And you also didn't set out to be a CEO.
No.
But now you are.
Yep.
And you're running this business, and in some ways, as an entrepreneur and a CEO of a successful business that, of course, happened overnight. You are now, you're now having to tussle, or are you tussling with what the role of CEO and the conditioning of what it means to run a business? How do you dance with that?
Mhm. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because people always say, like, what are you? It's like, well, I'm easily bored. And again, one of those conditioning things of our society is like, we celebrate specialists. And if you're not a specialist, you're a generalist, and that's kind of marginalized. But I've learned that I'm a multi-specialist,
Mhm.
because I learn extremely fast.
Yeah.
I don't learn things that I don't need, because I don't read books either, because there's a lot of text in the books that you don't need. I'm extremely adaptive, and I'm very easily bored. And I need to be linked to what really essentially matters in life. If I'm not, drawn into something, next thing up.
Mm.
That was always marginalized. Like, you never end anything. And that's been a big struggle. Like, you never end anything. I've, like, to give you a little overview of the things that I've done in my life. I've been a therapeutic horseback ride instructor. I have been a carpenter. I've been a social worker in a resocialization center for extreme problematic drug users. I have worked 10 years in international work in Afghanistan, to Sudan, Kenya, Indonesia, after big disasters, human or nature-based. And woodworker, architect. I've played in the band. I've sung solo in an opera. Like, the story goes on, right? There's so many things that I've done. That's with a female blacksmith in Sudan. That's in the school for the deaf in Kenya, in South Kenya. That's in Afghanistan with my mom, my Afghan mom, Kader Bibi, and a governor. And by reframing and reclaiming, again, new language, I always take apart language, because language is a very powerful tool to control us and to keep us small. Like, we celebrate this, and that is marginalized. It's either that or that, but there's so much more than either that or that. That's me in Sudan on a camel of the Janjaweed. That sounds really dangerous. There's a whole story behind that. And the other picture is me in Afghanistan, dressed by Afghans as in men's clothing, full well knowing that I am a woman, but I could just live my soul there without any restrictions. That's in Afghanistan and in Sudan. So something then leads me, my mom saying, "Over my dead body, will I ever use that?" to develop the Alinker. And very quickly in prototyping, I like to test the prototypes with people, obviously, potentially real users. And very quickly, I started realizing how big it was that what I've done, that the concept of not seeing a body with a problem, but designing something for how we want to live and move, was super important. A guy of early 80s jumped on one of the first prototypes and said, like, "Oh my God, I can run." He started running. He flipped around his cap and he started running. A woman who had never walked in her adult life because she's got muscular dystrophy got on the Alinker and said, "I feel so tall, I feel so tall." And through her, I learned that more than half the people that use wheelchairs actually can use their legs. But the moment they get out of their wheelchair and grab something from a shelf, they're seen as a fraud, because you're not really handicapped. You can walk. Why are you using a wheelchair? There's a lot of assumptions about disabilities and what you can and what you should look like and how you should behave. And it's rather intense. But I learned a lot of those things through people getting on the prototypes. And now, so 7 years, I built prototype, 4.5 5 years, I built prototypes until I started feeling that it was ready to go to market. I can't get out. It's a train. And now I have investors, So I am this person that doesn't like to speak publicly. I'd like to just, fuck around with wood and build shit. That's what I really like. Hang out with Afghans and have tea forever and build a few schools or something. And now I'm a CEO of a company. That was the last thing that I could have, fathomed for myself, because that's really the least attractive role that I can think of, in a way. And I can't get off this train. And I don't want to get off this train, because I have accepted this role as a tool, as the vehicle for doing what I actually love to do. That's why we have a farm, by the way. And we'll get to that later. But so just selling a bike would not be my company. I would be bored out of my gorge. Yeah. But the Alinker itself, and sometimes I say, and Lynn Marie is on a call here, we know each other very well, she's selling soap. I could be selling soap, but be exactly the same story. It would look different because I'd be selling soap, but the story about justice and about access to justice and access to mobility and access to a healthy life and community would be exactly the same. So I see the Alinker as a vehicle for change, and use my company to talk about shit that it justifies that I can talk about stuff.
Right.
For example, right?
Of course. Yeah. And it's as social entrepreneurs, most of the folks here in this room, they use their businesses as a vehicle for change and a vehicle for social good. But I want to drill down a little bit further, because, as you say, the language matters, but also the roles and identities, right? So you now have this identity of being a CEO, and you know that you have the path of using the Alinker as a vehicle. But how are you able to stay engaged? What are the ways in which you, as a CEO that wants to see their business thrive and grow and be as useful as it can be in what the mission is, how do you stay true to yourself in that, when you are not, as I understand it, and you should, I invite you to speak to this, but you don't identify, even though your name, is somewhat synonymous with the Alinker, you don't identify as your business.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you manage that? And should people, because I mean, sorry to interrupt, but that's the thing, right? We entrepreneurs, we sometimes get so wrapped up in our business and that it gets so tied to our identity.
Mm-hmm. Well, identity. Right?
Exactly.
So
right.
That's like, who do I want to be? And I've practiced that question throughout my life. And so accepting that I have to be a public speaker, and that I'm, the CEO of a company, that I have to talk to investors and blah, 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 take the abuse of investors very often, or whatever, people that don't know how to talk to me. They learn very fast, though, or they go away. But I think the essence has been, for me, my main goal in my company has been, how do I make myself missable as soon as possible? It's not me. And I'm way too lazy to be a micromanager. And I actually do believe in the co-creation of stuff, and that people, take responsibility. People love to take responsibility, love to have ownership. So my role as a CEO is to build a team where people can thrive, and can really find themselves, with a little bit challenging edges here because that makes you grow. If there's gaps, then it's my role, or me and Tanya and Molly, to see, oh, that is not covered, but then find somebody who can cover that gap. But in principle, I want people to find where they totally are happy and do that in the company. So years I was alone, because you don't have the means and whatever to build stuff. Now I have a team with 9 people and some contractors around it. And the last 6 weeks, I've been here at Kawarta Lake in a cottage with 2 people that just mind their own business. And I've been building staircases because people sometimes say, oh, the Alinker is your passion, the Alinker is your baby. It's not. Like, I love what the Alinker does to people, but it's not my passion. It's not. Definitely not my baby as a gender weirdo.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to take a moment and just to breathe that in and to just have the entrepreneurs in the room to really sit with that for a minute, because I don't know, by raise of hand, how many of you as an entrepreneur have said the words, "This is my baby," about your business? There are some more enlightened folks than others. I think that's a powerful, powerful statement, B. And I want to hear more, please.
So where my soul is home, where I understand life, is when my hands are connected to my brain and I can woodwork and make creations in my head come out of my hands. I have the intelligence of my brain comes through my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very kinetic person,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a woodworker. So when I make things like the staircase, that I don't know if you got a picture of that staircase.
Yeah,
Do you have that somewhere?
We do. We'll bring it up.
It's a staircase that's never been made in the world. It doesn't exist. Sort of a sculpture. It's also a well walking. Oh yeah, that's the start of it. It's the well walking staircase because it's a double riser, and you go 2.30 meters up, 7'7" for Americans, within a quarter turn. That's completely undone. It's not possible, and it's possible because I did that. But that is where I understand life, where I can feel my body, where I'm. So sometimes I totally snap out of it. And Tanya knows this, and Tanya completely allows me to do that. Because that's sort of and Tanya needs to snap out of it sometimes as well. We might go to that later as well and do our own thing. But there is, and it's good to be aware of that you have to snap out of it sometimes and really and it's not like going on a holiday, but it's really like remembering who I am in my soul and where I understand life. Because if I'm just on the train of being a CEO and all the assumptions that you like, there's stuff that you need to do, obviously, and that's all fine. But you might easily get lost, especially in the pandemic, with all the Zoom calls, with all this stuff. It's crazy, and that's not the good crazy. And there's been a lot of good in the pandemic as well, but there's a sort of disconnect. And so being true to what is it that I need? Like in the time that I built the Alinker company, I've been on 2 missions to Saudi Arabia, to Jeddah, to set up a woodwork project there. And 2 years ago, I was in Amman for a few weeks to set up a woodwork project there. And now I'm 6-week restoration. And now I'm 6 weeks here to build staircases and just fuck off, really, not be with too many people. And really like, oh, I love that. Just having the shit in my head, not being side railed by comments, by Zooms, by whatever. I'm a very solitary person. And my role doesn't allow me to be that solitary person.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to find the balance, and I really have to fuck with the assumptions of people that's like, oh, you do. you go to Amman, what do you mean? It's like, well, yeah, I need to stay sane. And that's, so it's not my baby and the Alinker is my life. There's a whole life that lives besides the Alinker, and the values are all included in the Alinker. So the Alinker is congruent with my values and with who I am. But
Right.
me as a person needs something else as well, at least
Yeah.
from time to time.
I love that. I love that. And it in the face of reclaiming crazy, when you're being true to yourself and to your essence and your real passion, that keeps you sane. And it allows you to be the creative human being that can build staircases and a business and travel the world and live the most interesting life. I'm curious, as we're thinking about, what are some of the what are the ways in which you do stay sane in this role of entrepreneurship and CEO, that some of the advice that you would give to the women here in the room, like what are some of the ways?
I think that goes back to something that again, language. You hear very often people say, like, I want to help people. I don't believe in helping people. I don't believe in helping others. What I'm doing is being the person that I didn't have, or building the community that I need to survive. So I use my company to create a community that I need to survive, the community at large. Ultimately, that might be attracted to people. That's why it grows. That's why the community grows. And that's why the company does well, because somewhere we're talking truth to power. Community creating a community of people that get me.
You broke up a little bit there, B, so we didn't hear that last piece.
Okay, so creating a community of people that get me, that get my crazy, that I get their crazy, allows me to be 6 weeks on the lake and they're like, B, don't worry, we've got this. We're doing this together. And I'm not gone, but it's more like I can be me and people are not upset.
Right.
So it's really building the team with crazies like Tanya, the brilliant crazies, that allows me to be me.
Right.
But that's a very intentional building of years. It took years to build that, to understand what I needed to do, to understand what the team needs to be, so I can be my crazy self without going crazy by the assumptions of others.
Right. Right. It's you know, what I heard you say, and I'm just following the golden threads, is being true to your passion, allowing your soul to speak through you in the things that you love to do, like woodworking, creating the community that you didn't have, that you need to have, and surrounding yourself, whether many or few, with people who get you and can really support who you are in the world. And I think that that's an important message for all of us as we sit here and think about all of the ways in which we are not supported, all of the ways that we buy into unconsciously the systems that have created this crazy capitalistic economic injustice world that we live in. And the way that I hear you saying that you are able to manage through this is being true to yourself and having people around you that can help reflect back.
And then put it back to
The most
the world is
salient
fine.
point.
But what
We missed that.
So bringing that back to the world, like what we do in our community,
Right.
is actually choosing who we want to be.
Choose who you want to be. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Beautiful.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then back to society, it's like these systems don't serve most of the people. This society doesn't serve us, yet we are
That's right.
conditioned.
That's
We
right.
are conditioned to be a certain way. Why do we act of how, and especially in this time of pandemic, I think we have a crucial question right now in front of us. Like, if we want to have a flying chance of survival, something needs to change.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So in this, undo conditioning is really the biggest question. Like, who do you want to be? What is the community that you want to show up in?
Beautiful.
That is gonna give us a flying chance of survival, really.
That's
Because
right.
if we choose who we want to be, and that is part of the land acknowledgements that we're doing, if we want to have a chance of survival, we'll need to a white supremacist, capitalistic, patriarchal system.
Exactly.
An economic model that screwed us up, that we now think we are, but we're not.
That's right.
Unless we continue to do how we're conditioned, then
That's
we
right.
are
That's right.
white supremacist people.
That's right.
So the
Oh, that's
unconditioning
beautiful, Cheryl.
and really choosing who we are,
Yeah.
is the work at the moment. And
Yeah.
we can choose together to
That's
be
right.
something else than what we have been trained to be.
That
That is the
is
work. And so by creating a community that becomes attractive, because it's all crazies and we're
Right.
celebrating crazy,
right. Right.
it actually becomes attractive, because
Right.
ultimately people do not want to change. You tell people that they have to change, nobody really wants to change. We
Right.
learn things, we put them in a pattern, right?
Yeah.
And the pattern. And now white supremacy has told us that we have the right to comfort. So now everything that we've learned, even that's abuse, or even if it's bad for most people, we are stuck with our comfort because we have the right to that comfort.
That's right. That's right.
Right? So not wanting to change, not wanting to change the world, not wanting to change people, but create something that becomes so magnetic and so attractive that people want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And then once they're part of it, they look back, it's like, oh my God, I made a huge change in my life.
Right. Right.
That's
right.
what we're doing.
That's right.
And that's the community that we're building.
I just want to say that you are a magnet that I think I can speak for all of us here, that we are just so drawn to, and we want to thank you. I don't. We're not going to end this. We want to go into some conversations with each other, because B, you've given us so much to chew on and to think about, and what I so appreciate about any conversation that I have with you is that I have to stop for a minute and just, like, if I can feel the cogs in my brain and just going like this, because you provide the opportunity and the invitation to break the wheel, to break the cogs, and to be anew. So I just want to take that moment to reflect that to you. And then what I would like to do is give you a chance to speak to each other, and then we'll come back. We'll hear a little bit about the farm, because I want to make sure people know what that is.
Yes.
B, and then we'll be close to our close for today. But so here's what we'd like you to do, is that we're going to, based on what B shared with us, I'd like you to consider, how is your business running you? B spoke about all of the ways in which they did not get, that they're staying true to themselves beside the business, in spite of the business. And then I'd like you to as we've spoken about ancestors, we've spoken about the community, I'd like you to think about and name one person in your community who helps you to remember who you truly are. So I want you to reflect on those two things for a moment, and we're going to put you into breakout groups. If you can't join, please rename yourself with an X at the start of your name. We'll be, let's see, it's 4:30. We're going to give you about 20 minutes to be in conversation with each other, and we'll call you back. Those are the prompts. And I think, Laurel, we're set up to do the breakout rooms.
We're crossing our fingers. Yeah.
And B, would you like to be in a breakout room, or would you need a, yes?
And we can do a breakout room about the farm for people that want to know about the farm, for example, if that is, you know.
Okay.
Well,
if you can pull it off, Laurel.
Maybe not this round, but we could do a stick around afterwards for sure if there's more questions about the farm.
Yes.
So we'll be starting in just a moment. So as we get ready to go into those breakouts, just take a moment, maybe even close your eyes or write in your journal. How is your business running you? Who's one person who helps you to remember who you truly are? And let's open those, even if there's a few X's. We can always move people around. And just a note for folks for the rest of the gathering, if ever you know you won't be able to go in breakouts, you can put that X in, because we're always prepping the breakouts to be ready to go. So that's very helpful for us. And so Tech, why don't you open those rooms and then we can sort those rooms later. So there might be a moment of shuffling, but we want to give folks the time to talk.
And we are going to do 15 minutes.
Great. All right. You should see an invitation there. Great. X's, if you've been invited to a room, you can decline. Good stuff. And if anyone's having trouble, just let me know and I can support.
I don't seem to have an invitation.
Was that Kristen?
I'm Kristen.
Kristen, at the bottom of your screen, is there a more button that you can click that pops up breakouts?
I have a join breakout room, which I've been clicking.
Not having success. Maybe I'll try moving you between rooms. Which room does it say for you?
It doesn't say.
Okay, I will find you. Kristen, thank you for your support, Kristen, in making this event possible. I'm looking forward to your introduction tomorrow of Rue. Kristen, I see you. Okay, so Kristen, I'm going to try moving you to another room and see if that helps us out.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you get another invitation?
Yep, I just got an invitation. I just got my first one to go to 20.
Oh, yeah.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Great. And Tech, I see your note that flowers are all over the place. That's okay. We'll sort that out. And I'm just making sure we don't have anyone alone. Andrea, I'm not sure if you're listening, but I love your profile picture. It looks like you're just staring at me happily. I'm really into that. Good stuff. So Pam, you can feel free to take a rest and go off camera if you'd like. RT, same for you. We'll be in touch.
I heard you. Love you. You're doing a great job.
Thanks, Andrea. And hi, Andrea Malmberg. We've just gone into breakouts. Is that something you'd like to be a part of? And no worries if not.
Yeah, sure. I just got off of a mountain pass. I'm driving home with my husband, and so I lost service for a little bit.
Amazing. Well, it's up to you. It's your call. We'll be in breakouts until Pam, actually, could you unmute yourself and remind me what time we're coming back?
4:45.
4:45.
Oh, I better just go in.
Okay. You're going to go in the house? Okay, great. Artie, you're also welcome to go join a room if you want to. You can just take your pick. And I'll poke you on Slack when we're ready to come back.
Great, thank you. How was that, everyone? Thumbs up? We could go on for hours and hours and hours with B. There's just no doubt about it. But the consensus is that we need at least between 3 and 5 minutes on the farm, B. So can we get an overview of the farm and what you're up to there? And just be back.
Sorry, yes, I'm
Oh,
back. I just
okay,
muted
great.
one of the most said sentences in the last year. You're muted. The farm. So we built. Where do I start? No, you said 3 minutes, right?
Little, yeah. We're running quite tight.
We think we have a healthcare system. We don't. We have a sick care system that makes money over sick people. We have a reactive sick care system that predominantly medicates. It makes money over sick people. Food, the whole food lobby of non-food makes us sick, feeds the pharma. That's a very short of it.
No, I think B is having connections. B, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Can now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay.
That's one of the things of being on a farm. So the food industry makes us sick, feeds the pharma industry that predominantly medicates. More than half of the US lives in food deserts. 60% of people in the US are pre-diabetic. More than half of that is easy to prevent if you just stop eating sugar and processed food. And if you prevent one person from becoming pre-diabetic to diabetic, you save $8,000 a year. For 45 million people that you can prevent by a little bit more exercise and very little food choices, that is a few for something billion dollars. That's just measured in money, not even measured in health. So we thought build a farm. No, we didn't think that. We had an Alinker user. That's a whole story, and I really should tell that story someday, but we're going to have a documentary on the farm. The guy who lives on the farm with his wife, they're both Alinker users, and they came out of homelessness because he has MS and lost his job. And then one day he calls me in a flying panic. He was moved back to the garage floor of his mom, who was heavily misusing alcohol. And he calls me in a flying panic and he said, B, my grandpa is going to sell the farm and I'm going to be homeless again. What do I do? And somewhere in the flying panic, he mentions $15,000. And I said, back up. Are you telling me that in Carter County, Kentucky, 40 miles from the next supermarket, your grandpa is looking for $15,000 to sell the farm? He said,
1.5.
yes. I said, 1.5.
Okay.
He said, yes. And I said, sold. Within 2 days, with Tanya's support on crazy ideas, of course, because we're going to sell a farm, like what? We're going to buy a farm. And I'm like, what? But it made sense. They are now safe on the farm. We're justifying talking about access to healthy food, because you can talk about healthier diet, but if people don't have access to healthy food, then you got nothing. So we build access to mobility, access to community, and access to healthy food, and the farm is part of that. Plus that we just last week on Earth Day launched a complete cradle-to-cradle approach, that we have a buyback program now for Alinkers. Yes. And we will refurbish, reuse, repurpose, recycle, and reutilize them or repurpose them in working with designers for all the parts, that nothing goes to landfill and everything is refurbished or reused and will be donated if they're not, whatever. And that's happening on the farm, and that's fucking awesome. And so that kind of justifies the farm as well, because now it's linked to the Alinker. Because if you just talk about healthy food, then people say like, I thought you were selling bikes. What?
Right.
But by putting the cradle to cradle on the farm,
That's right.
we're actually doing that. And with that, it is ultimately the idea that we bring assembly of Alinkers back to the US, employing disabled people and veterans and whatever.
Full circle.
Full circle.
I just, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you for being crazy, awesome, beautiful, non-conforming, gender weirdo, love bug that you are, the heart as big as this world. And I know that people want to speak to you more. You're going to be here for most of SVI, so that's the good news.